With July 4th coming up, I decided to take in my favorite of America's greatest pastimes. Confirmation hearings for a Supreme Court justice nominee. Elena Kagan's hearings have just started in the Senate this week, and I can already tell you what we're going to hear from Republicans. They'll harp about their judicial philosophy, which they say requires that a justice shouldn't interpret the Constitution, just follow it. Republicans love to talk about this judicial philosophy because it hides their real judicial philosophy, which is to rule in favor of corporations and fat cats and against people and the public. In short, strict construction, original intent, fair reading, whatever a conservative wants to call it, it's bullshit.
Now, spanning the globe, from Sunday talk shows to his Twitter feed, from across the fruited plains to Mars, bitches, it's That's Bullshit with Sam Seder and Bullshit. And now, Sam Seder.
The Constitution is a living document. It was written to be general in its scope, so that it would remain relevant and functional as the world around it went from powdered wigs to iPads. It's a set of values that are meant to be applied to circumstances that change through time. It's not a booklet on how to put together a ridiculously named coffee table from IKEA. But still, conservatives will babble on this week that judges, as Chief Justice John Roberts said in his nomination hearings, are like umpires. Umpires don't make the rules, they apply them. They also both usually wear black. They'll say that any judge who interprets the meaning of the Constitution is making law and is thereby an evil activist judge. What conservatives want to ignore is the fact that the Constitution promotes values that are sometimes in conflict with each other, making it impossible to simply call balls and strikes. Quick example. The Constitution explicitly tasks our government to provide for our national security, and at the same time guarantees the right of freedom of press with that whole First Amendment thing. Now for a hypothetical, as they say in law school. What if the government wanted to stop a newspaper from printing where, say, the Normandy invasion was to take place? Which trumps? The constitutional value of providing national security or of free speech? You got to think about that one, don't you? What's the matter, ump? Need glasses? The bottom line is, conservatives know that justices always interpret the Constitution and are always having to evaluate which constitutional value trumps and under which circumstances. In other words, they make law. So why the pretense by conservatives? Even a quick look at the history of the Supreme Court shows how conservatives interpret the Constitution as prohibiting the federal government from protecting and serving its citizens. Conservatives consistently seek to overrule legislation to rule in favor of corporations and the powerful few. It's why conservative justices found government protections like child labor laws and a 40-hour work week unconstitutional, and why they ruled it unconstitutional for the federal government to prohibit guns on public school property. About 30 years ago, conservatives began to understand that Americans didn't agree with their interpretation of the Constitution. In response, they came up with this simplistic talking point of original intent or fair reading or judges as umpires, which basically allowed them to pretend they didn't have an interpretation of the Constitution. That, according to them, they're just following what Jefferson and Madison wanted. And I'll tell you, those dudes loved baseball. I'm hoping that this week we'll hear Elena Kagan and the Senate Democrats tell Americans the truth, that it is a justice's job to interpret the law and the Constitution, and in doing so, end up making more law. But either way, now you know. When a conservative talks about umpires or original intent or strict construction, that's bullshit.
That's bullshit. That's bullshit.